So it's hard, right? And so sales leaders now have access to, let's say, an example tech stack can be Gong, Clary, Outreach, Salesforce. Um, and so, yeah, but I mean, where do you start? That's a good question. For me, it is really about starting with a hunch and then validating and deciding if that's the right hunch to validate or if it's something else. And so a really basic example of that is, hey, my reps are not doing enough activity to create enough pipeline. That might be the hunch. And so, where I would go with that is, trying to figure out there is Salesforce or Outreach with all the activity data in there. What is the person with the most amount of activity doing? Are they the top performer? Or what is the person with the lowest amount of activity doing? Are they the bottom performer? And trying to, take a hypothesis and then figure out where to find that data to further kind of inspect and be a detective to figure out, is that hypothesis true or false? And how do you kind of move to the next one thing to figure out how to refine your team?
Gotcha. And so if I could summarize here, just to make sure I'm pulling all this together, it's kind of look at the benchmarks, kind of figure out what's good, figure out what the best reps are doing, and then sort of compare the diff between this is what the best rep performance is, or this is what the best rep activity patterns, steps, sequences, what they're doing, and compare it to the people that might need improvement.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes it's really hard, right? So let's say you have 10 reps on your team and you look at the top two. They might be doing two very, very, very different things. And so you have to start somewhere. You have to figure out, like, are there any patterns that you're noticing, right? So is it call volume? Is it time of the day that they're calling? Is it emails that they're sending, and whether volume or quality? Are they sending more LinkedIn touches? Are they calling into a different geography? There's probably, 1,000 different elements that you can inspect. And so often it's, layering on a couple people, finding those similarities or dissimilarities, and figuring out, what are the one or two things that you as a sales leader think are the most impactful to change or to test. And so in that example, if your top two have the highest calls and your bottom two have the lowest calls, that's probably a really great place to start testing. But it might be, times of the day calling or a geographical place. So again, it's really about, looking at all of the elements compared to each other and trying to figure out what is that benchmark that you want to test against, and then putting a path forward to test against that to either prove or disprove your theory.
Love that. I love how you're starting with the benchmark. I want to sidebar a little bit because I just had a conversation with a couple of SDRs earlier today. This morning? Yes. Let's call it this morning. And we've got two SDRs. I know they're both good. One had a great month last month. One had an okay last month. The one that had an okay last month is having an amazing March. The one who had a great last month is having a very mediocre February. I'm like, I know I have two good people here. The one who's having a great March is following a very different process. It's a totally different style. And so I'm looking and I'm like, okay, it's a judgment call. I've got two SDRs with different styles and it's working. So do I just say, hey, you copy, like, this style is working this month, just copy paste exactly as it is, even though you're a different SDR with a different set of skills? Like, so I guess first off, what would you do in my situation? And then two, like, how do you address differences of style and kind of match that to the skill sets of your reps?
Yeah. So this might be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway. I am a big fan of, choosing your own adventure that works for you. And so for me, I've seen very, very successful reps be very low volume activity producers and highly personalized. And I've seen the reverse true. And I think that it's important to lean into those styles and benchmark against themselves. And so in that scenario, when you've got two reps that are both good, and, every rep has ebbs and flows every single, month, that's normal. It's taking their own set of data, looking at their own conversions across, various different metrics, whether it be activity or number of accounts they're touching or, number of contacts, et cetera. Benchmarking against themselves to find the trends within themselves where they're most optimal. And so, for example, rep A, maybe a high volume rep, And maybe in that, let's say in February, they did 1,000 activities, and that was pretty consistent every month prior. And then March, they're now at, 600. It would make sense. They're probably falling behind against themselves because they're lower than their own benchmark. The other rep may have done, 500 consistently and now is doing 200, and maybe they're actually stronger. For them, that to me would be a sign that highly personalization is actually better for them. And so that would be the trend. And so it's really about identifying, for them, where are their strengths and weaknesses? How do they perform against themselves to figure out how to optimize their own performance versus comparing against one another.
Totally fair. And I love the conclusion, or the distinction of some reps are high volume reps, some reps are personalized high quality reps, and everybody's got kind of a style that works for you. I don't know how controversial it is, but I think my opinion on the subject is you have to earn your ability to, you got to earn the trust, right?
Agreed.
If I hire an SDR and they're like, oh, I'm really good at email and I'm going to book all my meetings through email, it's I better see some emails or some award-winning emails and meetings booked happen in the first week. And if you're 3 weeks in and you say you're this, email rep and you haven't booked any meetings, you're losing that trust. And everybody starts with a little bit of trust, but you're not putting any more trust in the jar. You're emptying it out. And it's okay, well, you're 3 weeks in, that hasn't worked. Now what do we do? And I think what I default to is okay, we gave you some wiggle room, and probably, I don't know about 3 weeks, but I might do 2 weeks. And all right, you've got, you're batting zeros for 2 weeks in a row. Now we're going to do it the high volume way until we can see some consistency there. And then you can start layering back in the higher quality approach.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the important thing about what I said that I maybe didn't mention is you still need a benchmark to start your own assessment. And so, the story maybe makes sense a little bit later, but when I had first joined Salesforce last year, or I guess 2 years ago now, I had reps that were, really low volume producers, and then some that were really high volume, and performance was all over the place. And what I said to my team was, hey, I'm going to ask for 60 days where everybody is doing the exact same amount of activity, plus or minus, 100 or 200 activities. But within a certain benchmark, everybody needs to do 1,200 activities, no matter what, for 60 days. After that 60-day period, if you have earned the right to prove to me, based on your conversions, based on what the data tells me, that you are a rock star emailer and the phone doesn't work for you, 100%, that's going to be our plan for the next 60 days following. And we're going to prove your own theory. But until we have your benchmark, there's no way for me to make that decision. And I think that people, including sales leaders, actually have, they often make assumptions about themselves. So they say, oh yeah, I'm the best emailer. And it might be because those conversions feel better for them, but it actually might not be true, but they may really, really believe that it's true. And so for me, often it's about validating, is your theory true or not true? And once we validated it, then great. We validated this. Now we can move on to the next thing to better improve your sales skills. So that's kind of my own methodology, but I totally agree. I think you need to earn the right. And I think you still need you need to start on a benchmark and then decide from there, whether you need to decrease or increase activity based on that benchmark.
100%. Show me that you can do the basics, and then we can start playing with the more advanced stuff.
For sure.